Today, I welcome a pillar of the action figure world and host of the pop culture playground called Secret Galaxy, as well as his own personal channel called Dan Larson. It's Dan Larson. Welcome.
Works out nicely that way.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing very well, all things considered, with the 9 to 12 inches of snow or whatever it is outside.
Yeah. And we got off late here in Boston, by the ocean, but yeah, inland for sure.
Yeah, I'm feeling the shoveling right now, and the 47 years old.
Yeah. Oh, we're the same age.
Yeah.
So usually I would like to ask my guests to sort of introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about the channel. Obviously, you're probably one of the most well-known toy channels, but still, go ahead and give us the little brief intro.
Yeah, I'll give you the elevator pitch here version. We're currently, I'm Dan Larson, writer and host of Secret Galaxy on YouTube. We post every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. That's 4 videos a month. Usually we do have a second channel, like you just said, Dan Larson. If you rewind the tape a few years, we were called Toy Galaxy, and we started in 2015 and really grew from the toy community directly. We started off as just a toy review channel doing individual figures, and we started to expand out beyond that, different ways that you could present action figure information. We started getting into action figure history, and that's where the audience really started to push us in that direction. Do more history. And so we just sort of followed that to the point where now, just a couple of years ago, we changed the name from Toy Galaxy to Secret Galaxy. And now we're just sort of a general pop culture, anything that touches. So action figures will still play into it, but on our main channel. But for the most part, it's not dependent on that anymore. I'm still a huge toy collector and always will be. So my Instagram is still Toy Galaxy, and I am still armpits deep in action figures and everything that comes with that.
Nice. And kind of going back to 2015, do you want to talk a little bit about just those initial early couple years and just
Sure.
how what kicked you into it?
So producer Greg and I were a 2-person operation and always have been. We were we were doing independent films, sort of short film type stuff. He really wanted to make films, and I wasn't really sure what I was doing creatively. I was doing a lot of comics stuff, writing and drawing my own comics, trying to publish my own books. I had an online comic strip that I was doing, and so I would set up at comic shows and that sort of thing. And before we started the channel, I was also a dealer, the local comic shop that I was friends with all the guys that ran that. They ran the comic book shows. I started renting space from them to sell toys out of, because at the time I was buying collections, going to auctions, doing yard sales, flea markets, all that kind of stuff, which was just a growth of my own collection. It was like, how am I getting all this stuff? Where am I finding these things? And then you start to flip things, you start to sell things. You're like, oh, I'm a dealer now. How can I make this into a job? And it was that sort of transitioned us into making film. There was a couple of projects where we tried to really do an ambitious kind of film. And what we found was that if you don't pay people, you can't count on them. And that's totally fair. And it's a hard lesson to learn. And we learned it the hard way. So what we did was we said, look, who can we count on? How can we make some movies, some shorts, some videos? How can we build a portfolio and start to get some experience with this stuff and just have fun with it? We know we can count on the 2 of us. We got a camera. YouTube is free. Let's go. And so Greg never wanted to be in front of the camera. He always wanted to be behind the camera. He just wanted to make videos. He wanted to run a channel. I was always just hyper focused, obsessed with action figures. And having been a dealer, it was like I knew everything. So I was like, let's go and let's just do action figures. So we just started doing reviews, and the sort of general philosophy of the channel was like, let's treat it like it's a network, right? Like we've got all these different kinds of episodes, 10 things you need to know, 4 minutes or less, versus oddities, all these other sorts of things. And what we didn't realize what we were doing was we were basically giving it to the audience and saying, you tell us where you want us to go with our presentation. And the audience really dug into the history stuff, like I just said. And so that's where we went with it. But initially, some of those really early videos are still on the channel. Not all of them are, but some of the very early ones are. And any YouTube channel, you go back far enough and it's hard to recognize, what you're seeing, because it's just so different.
So when you started off, right from the get-go, you had those variety of shows, categories right from the start?
That was always Greg's idea. We had really surveyed the landscape of action figure YouTube, because I didn't really watch YouTube at all. Greg was a pretty heavy YouTube watcher, right? From the beginning, but I was not watching YouTube at all. I mean, I don't even, I mean, I was on Instagram, I think, maybe I was using Facebook at the time. But most of my social media and online activity was related to comics. And at the time, there, as little toy YouTube as there was, I don't even think there was really that much comics YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was, I didn't really care, because I was only concerned about what I was doing, making my comics, drawing my characters, my stories, that kind of stuff. It never occurred to me that YouTube could be a resource for those types of things. So when Greg and I made the decision to start a channel, I was like, well, I better check out and see what other people are doing. What does toy YouTube even look like,
And
So
what did it look like?
Well, at the time it was, Shartimus was still probably, I think he was the biggest at the time. It was Shartimus, it was Pixel Dan, Fwoosh obviously was there. D Amazing was, Glenn Webb. Glenn Webb was huge. Glenn Webb was huge, and obviously, who knows what he would be doing right now if he was still around. That was a really unfortunate loss for the community. But yeah, we kind of looked around and said, all right, there's a lot of channels that are doing hands in a booth, just sort of white background or something, you just disembodied hands kind of in the booth, doing that sort of thing. And you didn't really see people's faces. There were no real characters. There was no personalities in front of the camera. And so we said, all right, well, let's, how can we distinguish ourselves from the field? And the number one thing we can do is put me in front of the camera. Yeah. And because Greg is not a toy guy, we really pulled inspiration from non-toy channels. What are other successful channels doing? What are other media review, product review, what are other kinds of channels doing to engage the audience? And it just made sense to put me in front of the camera. I was super cocky, and I was like, just roll camera and I'll talk for 5 minutes, and then you just upload it. You're not even going to need to cut anything. And as soon as he hit record, I was like, I just had nothing. I was stammering and stuttering and tripping on my words and umming every 2 seconds. And I was like, hold up, let's come back next week. I'm going to write a script and we're going to do this right. And that's really where it was born from.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about script writing, because that's something that I think in the toy tuber world, there's not a lot of people doing that, I don't think.
I don't know. If I look around, I don't know that anybody else really does scripted stuff. And, our 4 minutes or less and our verses and those sorts of things, retro reviews, anything, because at the time we only had the one channel for the first, 6-7 years. We only had one channel. And so I would throw in, Dan in the photo booth videos, and those were unscripted. That was just me talking. And those are a tough watch for me, because we do so much scripted stuff. I don't want to hear myself just rambling. I don't want those ums. I don't want those fillers. I want to be able to take a breath, and I feel like I have to fill every second of noise, with noise, and I hate it. And
that happened to me. So I'm coming from podcasting. Like I started, even it was before I got into like toys in terms of like content creation. I had a podcast, and that I would edit. And then I started my toy podcast. DorkLair started as a toy podcast. And then that was edited. And then, so once we shifted to doing the podcast as a live stream, I had a really hard time, like rewatching it and just like, also just live having any sort of gaps. Like it was a struggle to like, just accept that there would be some little quiet moments, when it's live, but yeah, I definitely feel that for sure.
Well, and I'm sure that there's no such thing as reality television, right? There's no such thing as, once you turn a camera on, it's no longer reality.
Yeah, totally.
And because you've introduced this foreign element, and people's behaviors change, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. You change your behavior. You know where the camera is. You're trying to avoid it. You're trying to stay in the camera. Whatever. So there's no such thing as reality TV. And also, if you're editing, that takes reality out of the picture. And so what happens is, even if you are editing down a live conversation, a character starts to develop, a picture starts to develop, a caricature of the person that's talking, and it's no longer really that person. And that's kind of an abstract thing to say, but that's the reality of it. And so, in writing scripts, I'm writing the script and I'm writing them in my voice for me to read and perform, but it's not real. It's still, there's the Dan Larson now, and then there's the Dan Larson during an episode of Secret Galaxy where everything is sort of rehearsed and performed as opposed to just happening live. And that's a weird sort of distinction there. It's a weird thing to happen. But it is what made it easier for me to be more comfortable on camera, to know that I have the safety net
Right.
of a script and I can put more into sort of performance, the way I look, the hand gestures I'm making, the emphasis on the words, and know that I don't have to get it exactly right on the first try. Now, 8 years later, we've done it so many, we've got our system so refined that we don't even have like outtakes or anything anymore. If there is an
really?
outtake, it usually makes it into the video because it's funny, But in the very early days, there was a lot of just flubbed words and getting the giggles, and all that kind of stuff.
So you run through those pretty smoothly. You don't necessarily have multiple takes or these days? Yeah.
Not anymore, no. And
Wow.
because we've done it the sort of the same way, the production process is the same way, and because I'm writing for me, and I'm writing for the teleprompter for me, I know how to
Right.
put the breaks in, I know where to put the pauses in, and it's all, for the most part, it's all stuff that's very familiar to me. The biggest problem I have when we're actually shooting an episode is when I have to say names of people that I'm not used to saying.
Right. Right.
So Frank Welker, I've said a million times. That name just flows out. But if it's a brand new name that I haven't really seen before and I haven't said a lot, that'll trip me up. And we may have to record that section once or twice. But most of our videos, if it's a 15-minute video, there's only about 17 minutes worth of footage that we shot because it's pretty clean. We still want that sort of natural, as if you're really watching this thing happen live, and that sort of connection with the audience. But yeah, it is still rehearsed, and it is still, and when I say rehearsed, we do one read through right before we shoot.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's just to make sure that the words sound okay coming out of my mouth. There's nothing that trips me up, and that everything makes sense to the viewer.
How often, maybe this is also refined too, but how often do you run through the rehearsal and then make some edits before running through the recording?
Yeah. So Greg, so our whole process is, on Friday, Greg will start the research for the next week, whatever the topic is. He usually picks the subjects and schedules them into the calendar. And so he'll do the research Friday, Saturday. I'll start writing on Monday. And I've got 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, to go through all of his research and sort of fact check it for myself, start building my own chronology of events for whatever this thing is, figuring out what the context of this is. If it's happening in 1984, what happened before it, what's happening at the same time, what's happening politically, what's happening in, just the toy industry in general, in the movie industry in general, to see if there are some more interesting narratives that present themselves. Because if every single video is like, there was a toy line, and so they made a cartoon, and then it ran 3 seasons, and then it was over. Like, that's just not interesting.
Right.
Nobody's going to watch that. So we're trying to find more interesting stories to tell and more interesting things that are not immediately apparent. So by Monday, it's dig into Greg's research and start consuming the thing. If it's a movie, I got to watch the movie. If it's a show, I need to check out a couple of episodes. If it's a book, if it's a game, whatever, I need to be able to speak from a place of experience. And so hopefully by Monday afternoon, I've already started writing. I have sort of my general thesis, for the video, and I've written my introduction and my sort of setup. And then by Tuesday, that's just more research. As I get into the video, I start to realize like, oh, there's a gap here. How do I get from this part of the story to this part of the story? And so I'll have to dig out and do more research. And then day 3 is just a crunch day for me. That's usually the longest day of the week. That can go 10, 12, 14 hours of just this. The script's got to be done. It has to be done because we have to shoot first thing Thursday morning. So Greg and I hit the studio first thing Thursday morning. We'll hash out. We'll do a read through of the script. Usually he's already read it because I'll upload it to our shared, sort of drive space, and he'll be able to read it before we even get to the studio. And so once we get to our studio, we'll do a quick read through of it. If he's got corrections or changes, they're already, top of mind for him. Oh, this part was kind of weird. I didn't really understand this. Oh, I thought of a joke. How about, can we use this joke? Or a lot of times we'll both, now that the script is done, that's when we start to think of like, oh, this would be a funny gag. What if we have the hotline, and somebody's calling in about Mantech, or what if can we set up the TV in the background so we have a fireplace? How deep do we want? Does this need a costume? Does it need anything like that? And then we'll do a quick read through, make sure all the words make sense coming out of my mouth. And that everything sounds all right. And then as soon as that's done, we'll shoot it. And then 15-20 minutes later, we're off to lunch. Start the whole process over again.
Right. Well, so then when is he editing this?
So he's editing. So we'll shoot Thursday morning. He'll usually start editing Friday, Saturday. And he'll take usually, I don't know. I don't know what his actual timeline is. I don't think he spends more than 2 days editing. And then he's back into the rest of the sort of channel management and writing. And in this case, we have other outside projects that we're working on that hopefully will come to fruition in 2024. And he's usually working on that stuff too.
Nice. How often do you have to like get in touch with people in the industry to like get some of that research? Is that something that happens regularly, or?
I wish we could do more of that, but our timeline is so short. I mean, we're starting production on a video the week before it airs. Yeah, so that doesn't give us a lot of time. We've thought about, can we get 2 weeks ahead? Can we get a month ahead? But it doesn't work for us. We, at this point, we know overlapping would be terrible. It would be terrible. And again, I'm coming from a place of, all through high school, all through college, that report was done on the bus on the way to school. I can't get ahead of it. But it works because it fits the tone, and I'm going to take as much time as you give me. So you could give me 8 months to write a script, and I'm still going to write like 80% of it the night before. So, we've talked about like, oh, can I get a 4th day? No, you can't get a 4th day. You've got 3 days. That's it. You can't take any more than that, otherwise it's going to be wasted time. So right now it's really efficient. The one time that I was actually like, I can't find this anywhere, because at this point, right, it's 2024. There is no topic, there's no subject that we can come up with right now that somebody hasn't interviewed the actual people who were involved with it. YouTube, podcasts, whatever, all those interviews are out there, and they have spent far more time with these people than I could. So that's part of my Monday and Tuesdays, listening to these podcasts, reading these articles and stuff. Mm-hmm. We've got a subscription to, I think it's newspapers.com, which has like, archives of the New York Times, LA Times, local newspapers and stuff going back, generations. We can get articles from like the 1800s, and so we're always looking for, contemporaneous sources, right? So if I can get an interview with the guy who wrote the thing, I want to hear that person say the stuff. I want that quote directly from the person. And if there is a review of a thing from 1982, from 1985, I want to get it contemporaneously. The one time I was able to reach out to somebody was for our Mr. T animated series video. And one of the writers on that was Flint Dilley. Flint Dilley wrote for G.I. Joe. He wrote for Transformers. He wrote for all kinds of stuff throughout the 80s and into the 90s. And so I was like, I'm just gonna on a whim. I've got questions. There's not a lot of research out there for Mr. T animated series, so I'm just gonna go right to the source. And so he's on Facebook, and I messaged him, and I was like, hey, if you've got a couple of minutes today, can we just have a phone call or whatever? And he messaged me back like immediately. And was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And I was like, okay, this is great. This is like 2 days before we have to shoot. I can get on the phone with this guy. This is perfect. And so I called him, and I had this whole narrative that I had developed, all this reasoning for why it was a gymnastics team, why Mr. T was the coach, why all this stuff was happening. I'm like, oh, the Olympics, Mary Lou Retton, Perestroika, Russia, the Berlin Wall, blah, 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 all this other stuff. And he was like, you know what? I think just one of the executives' kids was in gymnastics. And so he was like, hey, what if they were gymnasts? And that was it. And I was like, okay, thanks for your time. Bye. That ultimately I learned a lesson from that. It was like, everything I need is online already. It's already out there. And as long as we're being careful to cite our sources and make sure that we're giving credit for all of those things and that research that's happening, it's way easier to do it that way.
Right. This made me wonder, so that was a relative deep cut. What would you say is like your, the Mr. T cartoon being a deep cut? What else would you say is one of your biggest like deep cuts?
So we did Sky Surfer Strike Force, which I had never heard of.
I have not heard of that.
So check out the video. You'll know all about it. You'll be an expert in 12 minutes. It was one of those ones that I was like, okay, sometimes it's a challenge because there's too much information out there, like if you're going to go do a story right now, if you're going to try to do a video about Star Wars episode 4, A New Hope, good luck consuming all that research and trying to formulate an original idea about anything. It's impossible at this point. Sky Surfer Strike Force is the other end of the spectrum. There's almost nothing out there. And, you can make some assumptions about why it exists. Toy marketing, promotion, once you've learned all these sort of levers that marketing pulls for toy companies and stuff over the years, you're like, oh, okay, like it's probably the same story, copy paste. But that's where it's a challenge, because you can't turn on the camera and just be like, hey, this is the same thing as everything else. So why are you making the video? So I was able to dig a little deeper into like, okay, well, what is sky surfing? Who cares about sky surfing? And it turns out it's around the same time that the X Games, were starting off, and that was a really big thing. And one of the events in the early X Games was sky surfing, where you basically got a snowboard, strapped to your feet, and you're surfing in the sky. So that gave me the opportunity to just have some fun with that video, and just try to make it entertaining when there's almost nothing to write about. But that's about as deep a cut as we go, because the reality is that there's this weird line between we need people to tune in, and there's no guarantee that just because we have X number of subscribers that anybody's going to actually watch. So of course your name brands, your legacy brands do best. If we can throw something out there that's Thundercats, X-Men, Batman, Spider-Man, Transformers, those are the hits, and those are the things that are always going to play well. But we can't be a channel that only rotates through those 7 or 8 topics. We got to expand out. And so, Greg spends a lot of his time trying to read the tea leaves of, is this thing obscure in a good way, or is this obscure in a bad way? And so something like Sky Surfer Strike Force, I don't know. It's a running joke through the whole video where I say it differently every time. Is that too obscure that people are going to see it on the thumbnail and go, I don't know what that is, and I don't care, and they're not going to watch? Or are they going to see the thumbnail and go, what is that? I got to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to go too obscure. We got to stay sort of in this realm of reality and something that people will actually tune in for.
How often, for lack of a better term, how often do you whiff? Do you have ones where you're like,
what?
That didn't really land?
The surprising thing about a whiff is it's usually on something that we thought was going to do good. We had been in a run of like, Knight Rider and Street Hawk and Manimal and those kinds of shows. And we're like, oh, Marvel Comics, MCU, this is going to be a hit. We're going to do the original Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk TV show.
Yeah.
And that thing bombed for us. Absolutely bombed for a while. If I checked it now, it's probably come around, but I think it's like a 4-year-old video at this point. So, it's probably picked up some views. But we thought that was a smoking hit right out of the gate. And we're got that splash of cold water. Like, just because it's the Marvel Universe doesn't mean it's a guaranteed hit.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we recently did Karate Kid, the Karate Kid animated series. And I was like, oh, Cobra Kai, Karate Kid, it's popular. Right. That should be okay. And that did not do well for us out of the gate.
Do you try to time things like let's say, I'm trying to think, I can't think right now of, maybe there's a toy that's going to release this summer or something like that, and it's like it's like an old line coming back or something.
Yeah, we tried. There was a time where we did that. So when the first Deadpool movie came out, when the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie came out, we definitely did that. The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, we would do breakdown, spoiler alert, here's our review, blah blah blah, those kinds of things. And what happens is that's exactly what the rest of the YouTube is doing.
Yeah.
So you throw out this video that's like history of Guardians of the Galaxy, and 30 other channels all put up their Guardians of the Galaxy video as well that week. So you just get lost in the shuffle. And so we said, all right, screw that. We're not even going to bother worrying about what everybody else is doing. Our bigger concern at this point, and for the last 2-3 years, is all of our videos are sponsored. And so at the end of the day, we have to take care of our sponsors. And all that means is delivering the views. Sponsorships are usually based on conversions. Are people watching? Are people clicking? That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And we got to make sure that we deliver those views. So, if the new James Gunn's Superman movie is coming out in, I don't know, 2025, I think. Are we going to do anything around the launch of that? Probably not. Not unless one of our sponsors is like, hey, we specifically want you to do a video about
Right.
Superman. We'll be like, okay.
Do you have multiple sponsors at once, or do you sort of like have them kind of like rotating in, or how do you kind of do your sponsors?
Yeah, there's a lot of third-party companies out there that are specifically for sponsorships. And so we deal with a couple of different companies that, they're sort of the middle operator between the
Right.
sponsors and then the content creators. So anybody who's watched, if you've watched 10 of our videos, you've seen Magic Spoon, you've seen 80s Teas, you've seen Geology Factor. There's some pretty regular ones because we've been fortunate that those sponsors have been happy. Magic Spoon has been a very good sponsor for us, and 80s Teas has been our best sponsor.
I feel like 80s Teas I've noticed the most.
No, hey, he's a great guy, and in terms of a product that matches the subject matter of the channel, like we could not have invented a better subject to team up with. If we were still an exclusively toy channel, then it'd be like, yeah, of course, Big Bad Toy Store would make sense. Entertainment Earth would make sense. But for the general sort of pop culture channel that we've become, 80s Teas makes so much sense. They've got music, they've got books, they've got D&D, movies, cartoons, toys, whatever, video games, and that works for us.
Nice. Okay, shifting gears a little bit here. How do you handle your I don't know how to say this, but the responsibility of influence?
That's interesting. That's a very interesting question. And it is definitely something that I think about. It doesn't apply so much to our main channel at this point, because most of what we're doing is sort of, here's everything you need to know about a subject. Here's the history of this thing. It's a primer. We don't even we'll go into deep on the sort of behind the scenes back end stuff, but we don't even really talk about the plot. I assume anybody watching our videos has either seen the thing or is going to go watch the thing. So it's like, make your own opinions about the plot. That's not really what we're here for. Outside of that, my own Instagram, our second channel, those types of things. There's definitely, in just social media in general, there's definitely that aspect of being an influencer. And for me, it's not that hard to balance because I'm just being honest about the stuff I like. It's like, and being transparent about how I have a thing. If somebody has sent me something, I'm saying, look, they sent me this thing, so I love it. It's great. It's fantastic. But know that they sent it to me. I'm not saying I loved it because they sent it to me, but take that into account as far as you making your own decision based on what I see. And I've got a long enough track record now that I think people would be able to spot it if I was, BSing them about something. And the most glaring thing that I think people would pick up on is there are things that I just don't talk about. And I don't talk about them because I'm not interested in them, because people aren't sending me them. I'm not buying them on my own, and I'm just not interested in them. That doesn't mean they're bad. That doesn't mean they're not good. It just means I don't personally have any interest in it.
Yeah, that happens to me, even not on a like someone sent me something basis, but if I'm like, let me check out this new thing and talk about it on my channel, and it's like I'm not that into it, and like it shows through. Like,
it's real tough, and I learned that lesson early on, because early on, when you first get into that position where companies want to like send you stuff, you're like, this is it. I don't have to spend $1 on toys ever again for the rest of my life. And what you find is that you have an obligation now. If somebody sends you something, they're not necessarily saying you're obligated. And in my conversations with those marketing people at the different companies, they will tell you that this is obligation free. The whole point of this is we want you to love it. And so we're sending it to you so that you will hopefully have a genuinely enthusiastic reaction to it. And you will share that with your viewers and your followers, and they will see that and they will want to be a part of that as well. So if they're sending you something that you're obligated to talk about, and the reality is you're not that enthusiastic about it, then what are you going to be putting out there in public? You're going to be like, well, it's okay. I mean, it's not really for me, but they sent it to me. And that's, they don't want you to be in that position. You don't want to be in that position. And I found myself in that position. at a certain point, and I was like, okay, I got to be a lot more careful about what I'm saying yes to, and what I'm, actually putting out there, and what I'm putting my name on.
I think a lot of audience members don't realize that too, because there's a lot of people out there who will look at reviewers. They don't know necessarily if that reviewer got sent something or whatever. They might make an assumption that they got it, and then they just go to town because the reviewer loved it, and they go to town on the reviewer as like a shill because they love this thing,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
And they don't
Yeah.
realize like that like that's not really how it works.
So the whole influence industry, there's some pretty good. I wish I could find a link. I wish I could send you a link to one. The way the whole influence industry works is that some marketer somewhere along the way did the math and said, we can pay one person X thousands of dollars or whatever. And I'm not even talking about toys. I'm talking about product reviews in general, clothing, makeup, DVD players, whatever. We can pay X number of people with this percentage of our budget out to people and ask them to say these things. It's great. I love it. It's my favorite thing ever. Or we can spend a fraction of that cost and just send out product samples to a spectrum of people across. This guy's got 100 YouTube followers. This guy's got 100,000 YouTube followers. Mm-hmm. We can send it out to all those people and just say, hey, if you want to say something, say something. If you don't, you don't. No obligation for us. If you do decide to make a video or whatever, here's some rules you need to remember. You got to say, FCC says you got to say, this was given to me. It was for free. It's a product sample for review. Beyond that, if you could say hashtag cool brand X product, that'd be neat too, but you don't have to. And, that works way better. That works so much better because they can get more product to a larger field of people, and the success rate is so much higher, and they spent 1/10 of what they used to spend on stuff. So, I mean, you've seen like in the last several years, I don't think Hasbro's doing as much as they used to. They used to send out like all these review boxes.
Yes.
And you'd see like Shartimus would get one. You'd be like, well, of course he got one. He's got 600,000 subscribers. But then somebody else would get one and you'd be like, wait, they've got 300 subscribers. Why did they send it to them? And it's like, well, they're just trying to get a diversity of voices and opinions and stuff. And, maybe this person didn't actually want to do anything with it and that person did. And so you've got the whole community talking about a thing.
Yeah. And those boxes had like a wide array.
They did. And some of those boxes, like I was fortunate enough to get some of those boxes, and a lot of times it'd be like, all I want is the figures. I don't want all this other stuff.
What am I gonna do with this?
I've still got back here in our closet back here. I've still got the lightsaber that you can like record sounds into, the Ferris Bueller lightsaber, and that's fun. I've still got it, but it's like having to talk about the little kid stuff. I'm just like, I don't want to do any of this. This is what I want. And at the end of the day, I don't think they want me to do those things anyway, because they don't want to hear me being like dispassionate about something and dismissive. If you have kids, no, spend my time talking about the things that I'm actually going to be like excited and enthusiastic about. And look, let's put this to bed, because obviously, right, like this is where everybody's going to come to learn about being a shill is on the the DorkLair show, right? There's no money. There's no money. It's not like, that's not how it works. Like anything has, for me, this is how it's worked for me. For Hasbro, I've done stuff for Hasbro, I've done stuff for Mattel, Boss Fight Studios, all this other stuff. If there's money, then you have to say that. You have to say it's paid. I'm being paid to do this. And if there's no money, you have to say this was given to me for free. And I've always been transparent about those things. And even if they do give you money, and I have received money for stuff, Four Horsemen, that's not true. Mythic Gaming, whoever's making the game, what's the name of it? Mythic Gaming is we did a promotion with them around the Kickstarter, and that was a paid promotion. They sponsored videos, but at no point did they tell me you have to say X. Here's our talking points. The game launches this date, or the campaign launches this date, buy in here. Here's the footage, blah, blah, blah. But there's never anything that says, Dan, you have to say, this is really cool. I love it. It's fantastic. It's my favorite thing. Like, that's not a thing. That's not how it works for me.
Going back to Hasbro real quick. Talk about the experience for PulseCon. So you hosted the PulseCon event back in October, September, somewhere in there, right?
It was August, September, somewhere around there. Yeah, the whole year.
How was that?
I don't know. It was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. The highlight, honestly, was all the people that were involved. I've been a huge fan of Hugh Adams. and his YouTube channel
Mm-hmm.
for years and years and years and years. When you talk about like who else is doing scripted stuff, Thu does scripted stuff, and he is smart and he's funny and he's knowledgeable, and he's just he's so good that I want to say he's a natural, but I know what it takes to actually get to the point to make it look like it's just comfortable and natural. So I was a huge fan of his, and I was intimidated by him because he was so good at what he did. And for years, we were just kind of like, I follow him, he follows me, we occasionally exchange tweets or whatever, or comment on each other's photos, that kind of stuff, each other's videos. And so in 2022 he was one of the hosts for PulseCon, sort of remote, and it was sort of a pre-game kind of thing that he ended up hosting.
Right.
But it was like a good half hour that they asked him to fill, and that's tough. And he's like, having a riff and come up, with just material on his own, that sort of thing. And then when 2023 was rolling around, he got invited back, and then they invited me as well. And I was, again, super intimidated because I'm like, well, I've never done anything like this before. This is going to be live. Like, that was recorded. This is going to be live.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people are going to be watching. I'm a scripted teleprompter guy. So what happens when we're actually live? That's going to be crazy. And then at the same time, I'm like, well, and then I get to meet Thu, who I'm a fan of. So there's a little bit of pressure there. Like, I want to be, like, I don't want to fanboy over him or anything. Like, I would like to just be contemporaries. Oh, you make videos too. Excellent. Let's talk about YouTube, and that, so meeting him was great. It was a lot of fun. And the original plan was going to be that he was going to, again, host the sort of pre-show, and then I was going to host the actual show. And neither one of us were real crazy about that. And then during the sort of pre-production of the thing, it got switched to, we were just going to be both co-hosting. Get rid of this pre-show thing. Let's just dig right into it, dive right into the show. 2 co-hosts, let Dan and Thu have fun. And, they gave us the script ahead of time so that we could rewrite it into our own words, so that we were comfortable reading off the teleprompters, and that sort of thing. And then just all the other people that were involved, everybody on those teams. When we used to actually do toy reviews, I set some rules for myself. And one of those rules was to always remember that, one, I don't care what the figure is, it's somebody's favorite. I don't care if it's the dumbest tongue lashing Jar Jar Binks or whatever. There's somebody out there that's their favorite action figure. So like, you can say things about it. Oh, I don't like the way it does X. Oh, it's not my favorite. But just remember that somebody does love that thing. It is important to somebody else. 2, nobody sets out to make a bad thing, right? Like, these are actual human people who got into toy design. They got into action figures. They're in this industry because they do love and care about this stuff, and they are passionate. And if that paint's wrong, if that joint is weird, if that accessory wasn't included, that's not their fault. There's budgets, and there's stockholders, and there's all this other stuff involved. So they don't have any control over that. So I never wanted to say, whoever sculpted this sucks. Whoever picked out the paints here is an idiot. They're people, and as someone who was coming from trying to make my own comics, I knew how that felt to try to produce something and have someone say, well, this color sucks. It's like, oh, okay, well, can you do better? Then shut up. So being able to meet, especially like, Lenny and Emily from the G.I. Joe team, and, Dwight and Dan, and Ryan from the Marvel Legends team, just everybody at Hasbro was just all the producers behind the scenes, everybody on the Star Wars team, everybody was just super nice people and super passionate about the thing. And you could just hear when there was things they wanted to say about stuff they, oh, why didn't you guys do X? And it would be like, we wanted to, feel bad. How did this get messed up? Well, I can't tell you the whole story, but it was out of our hands. Like, it's just that's the real, memories and stuff that I'll take from that, are the meeting the people, having those conversations, and just being able to spend some time with the people that are responsible for these brands that I've loved my whole life.
Nice. Kind of thinking about what you were saying, in terms of not yucking someone else's yum, right? Like, this idea of, I think there's a lot of channels out there that almost thrive on that, and sort of like build their whole thing around that kind of thing. Like, what are your thoughts on that tactic, I guess?
You know what? It's a big community, and if that's how you want to spend your time, and if people want to watch your videos, have at it.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I don't collect toys because I hate them. I collect them because I like them,
Yeah.
and I can't. There's no part of me that can spend the energy to be negative and to be angry and to be
Yeah.
upset. It's just like I could sit here for an hour and a half and talk about how much I like Novian Lean's boots. Why would I want to spend that much time talking about like how loose his hips are? Like, I don't
Right.
know. I would rather talk about
Yeah.
what I'm actually having fun with and enjoying. And that to me it's far more contagious in a
Yeah.
positive way. People don't I mean, obviously some people do want to feel like they're having some kind of impact by consuming negativity and whatever. But for me, when I am done with my day of work, when I'm sitting there trying to find something to watch, there's never a part of me that's like, I want to feel bad right now. I want to feel like crap. I
I
want
want
to
to feel
feel like everything
angry.
sucks. I just can't do it. Like
Yeah.
I want other people to be expressing the same kinds of, enjoyment and fun and entertainment and enjoying these toys that I am.
Yeah. I feel like almost some of those channels are like giving into the allure of the impact of that, and
Well,
it's almost
so
like some ways like manufacturing some of that like
so you have
anger,
to then step back and look objectively about what the business model is. What is the business model?
Yeah.
Is it we want to grow as fast as possible, and positivity doesn't grow fast, negativity grows real fast,
Yeah.
because we're giving a sounding board to this very active community that
Right.
wants
Right.
their voice heard quickly now.
Yeah.
They want to feel like they're part of this revolution to take down Hasbro or whatever, and I get that. I don't know to what degree that has long-term stability as far as a business is concerned, and I don't know
Right.
if once you've cultivated that audience, if you can turn it around.
Or
I
if
don't know
they're
if you
gonna
can.
stay too. You know what I mean?
That's
Like,
the thing, at some point, what are you in that business for? Are you in it because you actually do like toys and action figures? And at some point, are you going to try to pivot to, okay, now I'm going to put out a video about how much I really like a thing. And is that
mm.
audience going to come with you? Now he's a shill. Now he's sold out. Now he's, whatever. And it's like, no, you made your bed.
Well, Dan, do you want to share any goals that you guys have going forward for the channels?
Right now we're happy to sort of be in a place where this is self-sustaining as a full-time job for two people.
Mm.
We have huge gratitude to our patrons. Check us out at patreon.com/toygalaxytv. And, and to being in the position where we are able to have sponsored videos and schedule that stuff out so that we know what our income is going to look like for the year and be in a full-time position. So right now our main goal is just to sustain, to keep that going while we can build on other things outside of the channel. And I don't want to be like, I'm teasing a bunch of stuff, but we're talking about stuff in the background. We're pursuing options. We did our Halloween special last year was a long short called The
Yep.
House on Coffin Brook
Mm.
Road, which was it was a milestone. It was a milestone for us where that's sort of what we grew out of, was making short films. We used to compete in like film projects and stuff, weekend long film projects, those kinds of things. And that short was sort of the culmination of everything that we had learned about filmmaking prior to starting the channel, everything we learned about filmmaking while we've been making the channel, and sort of trying to put it all into one package,
Mm.
tap on some of these, resources of relationships and stuff that we've made, and try to produce the best possible thing we can under the constraints of still making all of our videos for the main channel, still having to do all of these other things, and basically do that on nights and weekends, try to make a movie with no money. We ultimately did spend quite a bit of money out of our own pockets, just because you got to feed people, you got to pay for Airbnb for the house, you need a bunch of props, you need a bunch of costumes, those types of things. So we did spend some money, but it was really like pushing the limits of what you can do with that, or what we can do with that kind of guerrilla filmmaking style. And so after we finished that, it was like, okay, that is as far as we can go with that. How do we now push out beyond that? Greg has always wanted to be an actual, like make movies, be a filmmaker. That's always been his goal. I'm happy to help be a part of that and contribute what I can to it, whether that's acting as a producer, securing locations, coordinating actors, and that kind of stuff, or if it's doing some script writing, doing some plotting, whatever. So we're looking out beyond and saying, how can we push out into both with respect to the channel? How can we push the channel into a place that maybe it's out past YouTube? And then how can we take just being creative and making film and video and sort of things? How can we push that outside of YouTube as well? So hopefully we'll have some news soon. And if not, nobody will know the difference because we're still just going to hit our Thursday at 5:00 every week.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time and coming on here
Absolutely.
and sharing all that with us.
For sure. Thanks for having me.